Mr. Prime Minister, thank you so much for sitting down with me today. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to you despite the difficult circumstances in which we find ourselves as a region and for the global community looking at what's happening in Armenia, in Azerbaijan and in Nagorno-Karabakh. First, I'd like to ask you, over the past few days, we've seen large numbers of reports of both Azerbaijani and Armenian troops squaring off against each other across the border. There's talk of a significant Azerbaijani build-up along the border, both with Armenia and in Nagorno-Karabakh. And I'd like to ask you how close you think we are right now to a new conflict.
Thank you
very much. As you know, because Azerbaijan has started its accumulation of forces along the border of the Republic of Armenia, the Republic of Armenia shall also take certain measures in order to defend itself. But I think that in the Republic of Armenia, the EU civilian monitoring mission, which is along the border and is conducting, observing and monitoring mission along the border, they can say that the Republic of Armenia has no intention for escalation, and it is Azerbaijan that has started to bring its central forces towards the border with Armenia, and in fact, also along the line of contact, the entire line of contact with Nagorno-Karabakh. In such a situation, unfortunately, it is not possible to exclude the scenario of escalation or this option, because the forces that have been mobilized, they should be taken back to their bases. Armenia is ready to do it.
Yeah, and at the same time, we hear talk in Washington, in Brussels, from the mediators who've been involved in the negotiations, that peace has never been closer. Do you feel that peace has never been closer?
As you know, indeed, the negotiation process, in my opinion, is seeing very serious developments. If we try to understand the peak of the seriousness of these negotiations, I would say that it is the agreements achieved between Armenia and Azerbaijan, that our countries do mutually recognize each other's territorial integrity. 86,600 square kilometers for Azerbaijan and 29,800 square kilometers for Armenia. In fact, this agreement can be considered a cornerstone for peace. But the problem is that, for example, I myself, after this agreement, reconfirmed it publicly, and I reconfirm it now also, our commitment to this agreement. The Azerbaijani position in this regard is not very clear. And this situation may also be demonstrating some motivation, or demonstrating which party, which side is motivated or interested in this military escalation in our region. On the other side, I have to say that the illegal blockade of Lachin corridor and the humanitarian crisis and the continuation of the humanitarian crisis in Nagorno-Karabakh is having a very negative influence on the peace process, and the sincerity of it is becoming under doubt. I also have to say that in the context of the agreements that I mentioned, it is very important to consider the security and rights of the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh and having an international mechanism for Baku-Stepanakert dialogue.
I want to just push you on that question because there's a number of different interpretations of Armenia's position. Just to clarify, is your recognition of the entire territory of internationally recognized Azerbaijan, is that contingent on a peace deal, or do you currently recognize Nagorno-Karabakh as sovereign Azerbaijani territory?
Տեսեք, մենք պայմանավորվել ենք Ադրբեջանի
Look, our agreement with Azerbaijan is the following, that Armenia and Azerbaijan, as I said, mutually recognize each other's territorial integrity. 29,800 and 86,600 square kilometers. Then, after this agreement, in Yerevan, during a press conference, I was asked by a journalist whether or not 86,600 of Azerbaijan includes Nagorno-Karabakh. I answered that yes, it includes Nagorno-Karabakh. But I also want to say that this does not mean that by this we are condemning the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh to ethnic cleansing or genocide. We did not give such a mandate to Azerbaijan. Therefore, this is the reason that part of this agreement is the rights and security of Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh, having mechanisms to address these rights and especially to build a reliable Baku-Stepanakert dialogue, a meaningful dialogue for which we need to have certain frameworks, understanding of frameworks about its start.
And do you genuinely believe now that a negotiated settlement can ensure security and rights for the Karabakh Armenians? And are you facing any pressure from the international community to accept a deal that could lead to the exodus of the Karabakh Armenians?
This indeed, I know that some talks are out there on this. I don't know, or maybe I can guess who is spreading these talks. To speak about the exiting of Nagorno-Karabakh means certainly to agree with the ethnic cleansing or with the deprivation of homeland for these people, because they are living in their homes. Can you imagine when we are speaking about ethnic cleansing? Ethnic cleansing tool does not have to be physical extermination of people. No, any genocide has two parts. One part is the massacre, the other one is forced exile. And I have to first say that, yes, there are some talks out there, but there is no such agenda. There is no such agenda. Moreover, the representatives of international community are very clear. They are saying that the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh should be able to stay in their homes in Nagorno-Karabakh without fear, without prosecution. They have to have this opportunity to live in dignity, in security, and in welfare.
And in the worst case scenario, one where the international community is not prepared to broker a deal that you would like to see, have you done any talking or had any thinking about, for example, a quote-unquote humanitarian evacuation of the Karabakh Armenians? Is there any contingency planning that your government has done to try and ensure that people aren't caught up in another conflict if another conflict were to break out?
We should do everything to avoid such a conflict. I think that the international attention that is today focused on Nagorno-Karabakh or the peacekeepers in Nagorno-Karabakh, this shall be able to become sufficient mechanisms in order for the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh to be able to live in their homes with dignity and security. Moreover, the discussion of this topic, I consider it useless and also dangerous, because if anyone circulates such talks, they will bring to the agenda, or they will bring new agendas to the table that might mean let's legitimize internationally the ethnic cleansing of the Armenians and genocide of the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh, and whoever manages to escape from Nagorno-Karabakh, good for them. Whoever not will be massacred. This type of ideas, the flow of such ideas, in my opinion, in my assessment, is indirectly encouraging the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh to be subjected to ethnic cleansing or genocide.
Over the last few days, over the past week or week and a half, your government has taken extraordinary steps to build bridges with the West and at the same time received a pretty stern rebuke from Moscow. You've sent humanitarian aid to Ukraine for the first time as Russia steps up its strikes against civilian infrastructure. Your First Lady has been to Kyiv and was received very well by all accounts. You've withdrawn your representative from the CSTO. You've invited US soldiers to come and stage exercises, peacekeeping exercises with Armenian armed forces. Does this represent a permanent step away from Russia? And are we watching a kind of Yerevan spring unfolding?
Spring in Yerevan will start in March and will end in May. Now it's summer comes in Yerevan earlier than usual. So every year we have summers and springs and falls and winters in our country, given also any other country in this climate zone. But you mentioned about building bridges with the West. We do not need to build bridges because these bridges have always been there, starting with the point when our relations with the United States have started and become into a strategic dialogue since a long time. Since long time we have had joint military exercises, and whatever you mentioned about Ukraine, what happened is a humanitarian step. There's no need to politicize that additionally, because if anyone thinks that at any point we will be indifferent or we have been indifferent to any human tragedy, or we had any political calculations when it comes to human tragedy, or when it comes to supporting people in tragedy, these people are mistaken. We have always discussed how we can react. In this case, we had this occasion that the First Lady of Ukraine organized an event which was within the scope of First Ladies and Gentlemen's International Cooperation logic. My wife is quite a long time quite actively involved in these processes,
Sure.
and this was just part of this working agenda. When it comes to Russian CSTO relations, you may know that here we are fully transparent. We are transparent about the problems that there are, the issues that there are. We always speak about this, and we will continue to speak about this publicly, also at working level. But I think that these conversations also, of course, are contingent to the state interests of the Republic of Armenia. We are guided by the state interests of Armenia. Therefore, I do not want, there cannot be a case when Armenia in any ways becomes a proxy, in any ways has a role of proxy. No, I don't think this is permissible. The Republic of Armenia has very serious security challenges, but addressing the security challenges we see by way of strengthening our sovereignty, our independence, and as in the past, also in the future, we will do everything to ensure our sovereignty, security, independence. But when it comes to concepts, I want to share an idea with you. and also with your audience. In general, when it comes to geopolitical centers, our relations are very important, are very decisive. I will repeat, we have never declined and we will never decline our state interests or the relations for our state interests or the agenda based on our state interests with any geopolitical center. But also myself and my political team and myself in this regard, we are in harmony, and I think that our society is more and more saying the following: if we want to have lasting, eternal statehood, first of all, we have to take very serious steps to invest very serious efforts to regulate, to settle our relations with our neighbors. The model that we will have problems with our neighbors, and for these problems we will need to invite others to protect us. It doesn't matter who these others are. This model is a vulnerable model because these others, at any point, for objective or subjective reasons, very often not wanting, very often in order to settle their own issues. These others may not be here, even if they want to, may not be able to help us. Therefore, our strategy should be to try, in this situation, the situation of needing or depending on external help, we need to try to maximum decrease this dependence. This is a theory, this is a concept that realizing and implementing it in our region especially is extremely difficult. We have social, psychological, historic, geopolitical issues in our region, in our environment. Our region is very complex region. It's one of the most complicated regions. But in this regard, what is happening right now and what we are doing right now is work aimed at statehood, at sovereignty, at independence, and strengthening this. And the strengthening of this trilogy, I want also to add strengthening our democracy, our agenda for strengthening democracy, strengthening our security. These are interrelated. And the culmination of this, in the end of the day, has to be freedom and happiness of the citizens. And this is the agenda that right now is guiding us to take steps and measures that are not easily perceived and that are by large criticized. But we are committed to share this agenda with our citizens so that they will understand all the motivations of our actions.
And I want to come in on that because you talk about independence, you talk about statehood, and these are all obviously admirable goals. But when you came to power, you've inherited a country where Russia has a monopoly on the railways. You have Russian armed forces, you have Russian border guards, a division of the FSB at the airport on the border. You have Gazprom with a monopoly over the country's energy supply. Do you think that gaining independence, real lasting independence, means moving away from that relationship whereby Russia has had a monopoly on your security, on your energy system, and on many aspects of the day-to-day administration of the country?
Ընդհանրապես կարծում եմ, որ
In general, I think that today Gazprom is not only supplying gas to the Republic of Armenia, it is supplying gas also to several other countries, and these are factors, the role of which, of course, shall not be undermined, but also should not be overestimated either. Because yes, gas is important for the economy, for everything. But again, it is independence, it is sovereignty and statehood for which we should not be based or dependent on one factor only, gas or anything else. And I also think that when it comes to gas and independence, these two concepts should not be compared, are not at the same level. It's not correct.
Sure. Although what I would say is countries like Moldova that are comparable to your own, that have taken what Russia has seen as a pro-Western course in recent years. Russia has used energy supplies to blackmail them. And at the same time, I'm talking more generally about Russia's unparalleled influence in this country. I don't think there's any other country that has Russian soldiers willingly stationed inside the country.
Նման իրավիճակ ծագել է Հայաստանի անկախության.
Such a situation has started because of the assessment of the security needs of Armenia. I do not want to undermine any factor you mentioned, but I want to repeat that we have an issue. Our task is to settle the relations in our region in a way that we would not depend on any external support or to minimize the need for external support. We together, we need to also agree that this is not easy to do. This is not easy to do, but on the other hand, by defining this issue, we have reached to a point when we have to answer to ourselves, do we want to have an independent country, a sovereign country? And if we want, and we do want, we have to have ways for solutions and developments in this regards, maximum avoiding west or east, north or south clashes or ending up in the center of such clashes. In this period, you said, you mentioned Russian monopoly, Russian influence. In this period, since the beginning of our independence, we have had very serious and natural relations with the United States. From 2019, these relations have become strategic dialogue. With the EU, we have the comprehensive and enhanced partnership agreement. With Iran, Islamic Republic, with Georgia, we have always had deep relations. And now we also want to settle our relations with Azerbaijan and Turkey. And it is in this context that we are facing challenges because all the burden of the previous period is a problem that now we need to manage. We need to have flexibility, wisdom. We need to be sober, and we also need to understand that this process contains very serious risks. And this is exactly what we are trying to do. But again, it is important for us to define our objective. There are things that we are doing, but some of the citizens of the Republic of Armenia may perceive it as traitorship. Others may consider it as correct policy, yet others may think, may be still following us to be able to clarify their position towards us. But our policy is for the sake of having an independent state. By the rules known to the world, we want to have a sovereign state.
And do you feel that you're getting the support you would like from the EU, from the US, in mediating that process, in supporting Armenia to, increase its sovereignty, its independence? And do you think, when you have the EU, you have the US, are you looking for security guarantees? Are you looking for support in terms of military exports, for example? What are you currently not receiving from the EU, from the US that you would like to receive?
Of course, support and help is never too much, especially for countries like Armenia. But on the other hand, I do not want, and I cannot not thank them, because the EU has deployed the civilian monitoring mission in Armenia along the Armenia-Azerbaijan border. This I consider quite a serious support, for which I am always grateful to our partners. The EU and the United States are also supporting us when it comes to democratic reforms agenda. But again, I cannot say that the support and the help that we are receiving is sufficient to serve our objectives and our agendas. But on the other hand, we are actively working with all our partners, our positions we are trying to make more clear to them, and as a result, we are hoping to receive greater support.
And when you sit down with President Aliyev in Brussels or in Washington or in Moscow, and you sit across the table from him, do you feel like this is a man negotiating with you in good faith?
I would not want to give the atmosphere of the negotiation room publicly, because the fact is that so far we do not yet have an environment of confidence and trust, because had we had this environment, a lot of the issues we would not be facing now, such that we are facing now. What is my reaction to this? I aim to continue to work, be more consistent and persistent, and try to find solutions, try to find ways for progress. All in all, I can say the problem is the following. If not, without going into details, the main problem is that, as in the past, Azerbaijan had and Azerbaijan is continuing to apply the policy of force or threat of force, which is complicating the situation very much. And I think that when speaking and ensuring future progress, this is one of the main obstacle, and in this regard, the international community and the forces that are interested in having peace and stability in our region should exactly in this matter try to support Armenia, the Republic of Armenia, support also for the sake of for the efforts of achieving peace in our region.
But do you think that Western mediators, when they talk about good faith negotiations, we've had talks after talks on talks, and at the same time it seems that nothing has really been agreed. And at the same time as well, the military situation continues to evolve. There continue to be firefights. There continue to be boys coming home in coffins. Do you think there's a naivety around the talks? Do you think that effectively the talks are in a different track to reality?
Look, speaking about the negotiation process, normally the mediators say that they should be neutral. My response to this is the following. I say, when one of the parties is exercising force or the threat of force, and the other party is vulnerable when it comes to its security, then neutrality is encouraging the side, the party that is using force or threat of force. In such a situation, therefore, neutrality in its full meaning is not really neutrality, but rather a way to further encourage force or exercising force party, threat of force party. And in this regard, in such a situation, those mediators who are acting in this direct logic, these mediators are, or the mediation of these mediators is not effective, because the objective or the function of the mediator should be, or the constructive function of the mediator shall be to form an environment in the negotiation process when the interest for peace will be equal for both parties.
So you talk about neutrality here. And obviously after the 2020 war, you had an attempt from, or an apparent attempt from Russia to come in and become a security guarantor, which I think you've said relying upon was a mistake. You used to have the Turkish-Russian Observation Center. I don't know what happened to that. I interviewed a young woman from Stepanakert, and she told me her brothers are serving in the defense forces, and they said, we're in the trenches, we're looking at the Azerbaijani troops, and she says, where are the Russian peacekeepers? They say, behind us. You know, do you feel let down by Russia? Do you think Russia's done not enough to uphold the 2020 agreement when it's undertaken to keep the Lachin corridor open, when it's undertaken to maintain the contact line as it was? Do you think Russia's failed as a security guarantor?
Գիտեք, ակնհայտ է, որ
You know, it is obvious that the 2020, after 2020 November 9, in Nagorno-Karabakh, the security situation has changed acutely. Violations of the line of contact, invasion into the territory of Nagorno-Karabakh. We have had a case when a person doing agricultural works, a citizen, in the presence of Russian peacekeeper, was killed by an Azerbaijani sniper. This is an obstacle for agricultural works, and of course the blockade of Lachin corridor and the humanitarian crisis in Nagorno-Karabakh. All of this, after the trilateral statement of 9 November 2020, all of this was supposed to be in the sphere of responsibility of Russian peacekeepers. And in this regard, as far as these issues exist, yes, the Russian peacekeepers have failed their mission. But on the other side, on the other hand, I cannot say that if the Russian peacekeepers had not been in Nagorno-Karabakh, now the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh in such situation would have been better. No. I want to be clear on this, and this is a nuance that I want us to understand very well and very correctly. I think that both what I said is correct.
And when, you know, why do you think the Russian peacekeeping mission has failed? Is it incompetence on one hand, a preoccupation with the war in Ukraine, or is this a deliberate decision to avoid angering Azerbaijan and Turkey? Has Russia chosen a side or just failed to uphold its side of the bargain?
You know, I think both factors could have certain role to play, because the events in Ukraine, and as a result of the events in Ukraine, the capabilities of Russia have changed, but also on the other hand, I think that there is the second factor that you mentioned. Both the first and the second factors in my assessment exist.
Yeah. So over the short time you've been in office, you've obviously woken up to the news that a war has started in your country. You've sent young boys off to battle to defend their country. There probably aren't very many world leaders alive who've shared that experience, but one is President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, and I wondered whether you have a message to share with him. If you were to meet with Zelensky right now, what would you say to him?
Գիտեք, երբ որ ես Զելենսկիի հետ
And if I meet with Mr. Zelensky, I will personally say to him, I don't think it's a good genre to send messages to each other for leaders of states during interviews.
No, I understand. That's fair enough. But there's obviously a lot of interest in Armenia right now because it's such a strategic.
By the way, last time in Moldova, in Chisinau, it was a meeting of the political community of Europe. He was there, I was there. We exchanged some words. We do get occasions to exchange messages with each other. And really, I don't think this is a good way to, in distant, send messages. We also sent messages to each other on different occasions. Recently, I congratulated him for the Day of Independence of Ukraine, etc., etc.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of interest.
One thing, if I may say, on this occasion, war is a very bad thing. When in 2020 the war started here, there was much talk about what should I have done to avoid the war, which is a correct and legitimate question. After which, the war in Ukraine started. I was watching the situation and asking myself a question. What should they have done, the leaders of Russia and Ukraine, to avoid the war? We all know that war is a very bad thing. Without exception, everybody. Yes, in all cases, we have to do everything to avoid wars, and this is also the reason why we have committed to, why we have adopted a policy, regardless all the challenges, regardless even the absence of optimism. We are continuing to be loyal to our peace agenda. We are continuing to be loyal to our agreements. And we do hope that Azerbaijan, in its turn, will also eventually express and show its loyalty to the agreements that we achieved in international platforms.
And I mean, when you think about what your legacy as Prime Minister might be, you came to power on a reform agenda, you've had undoubted success at reducing corruption, at strengthening institutions. This is one of the freest countries for the press, for freedom of speech in the region. Would you like your legacy to be leading Armenia to the point where it could have the same aspirations, for example, as Georgia, to join even the EU, to build closer relations with NATO? Do you think that's the course that you'd like to see the country put on?
First, peace. Most important, peace. All the other matters are important also, but peace is an objective. Peace is a means. I spoke about the sovereignty of the country, of the state. I spoke about democracy. But even democracy, sovereignty, and peace are, in the end of the day, to serve the welfare and security and the happiness of the people. For me, this is the perception that we have to do everything so that the Republic of Armenia will be in peace, a country of welfare, where people with their creative work will be able to build their welfare, their life and happiness.
And is this a one-way street for Armenia towards democracy and peace? Or are you concerned that if the crisis in Nagorno-Karabakh worsens, the opposition in this country could find more support for the idea of, well, we're in this situation because we weren't nice enough to Russia. We have to join the Union State, for example, in order to get security guarantees. Are you concerned at the perception that if the West and democracy is perceived to have failed, Armenia could go back to where it was before?
In general, I think that this question is whether democracy is able to ensure security. It depends in the air, in the political air of Armenia. A lot of things depend on the answer to this question. I really hope and I am convinced that we should do everything to get a positive answer to this question. The peace agenda, this is one of the most important components of the peace agenda.
And then finally, if it's okay with you, I'd like to just ask, you came to power full of optimism and hope to change your country. In 2020, you obviously went through the war. You saw large numbers of young men buried. You spoke with their families. You watched that process, and I'm sure you feel a degree of responsibility for anyone who serves in the Armenian armed forces right now. Shortly after the war, your father died, and I'm sorry about that. How has this process? How has this kind of simmering conflict, this constant fear of a new war, how does it affect you? Your mental health, your well-being, how does it affect you from doing your job and delivering on your priorities?
In general, of course, it is very difficult. It is very difficult not to get emotionally burned out in such a situation, because very often I communicate with the relatives of our fallen soldiers. You can understand that these conversations are not easy, but they're not easy not only for them, but also for myself, because once or twice, a couple of times, I had an occasion to get sincere with them and tell them about my own perception. I told them that, look, each one of you has lost one relative, one son, one soldier. I have lost thousands. And there is no exaggeration in what I am saying. But on the other hand, if we have taken the work, the task of state management in this high position, if we are not able to be without emotions, then no one will benefit from this. It will not be better for the country. It will not be better for the fallen soldiers who, in my perception, fell in order for the Republic of Armenia to live, and the Republic of Armenia shall live, shall develop, shall be free, democracy, welfare, and peaceful.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister.
Yes, I'm
Thank you very much.